It's been said no character has been played by more actors on stage and screen than Count Dracula. Certainly, Bram Stoker couldn't have predicted this when he first published his classic horror novel Dracula in 1897. But in the century plus since, the book's titular vampire has been portrayed countless times, often reinterpreted and reinvented to serve various genres and tones. Dracula has been the villainous predator of the novel in many media adaptations, but he's also been a tragic, romantic figure, a surprising hero, a calculating supervillain, and a comedic buffoon. The adaptability of the character to fit different interpretations plays a large part in answering how and why he's been used so often. But, perhaps not surprisingly, Dracula is not the only character from Stoker's novel to enjoy a long-lasting cultural imprint. A number of the book's supporting characters have also frequently made the leap to stage and screen. Most significantly, of course, the man who has commonly come to be known in pop culture as Dracula's arch-enemy, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. Described in Stoker's novel as a Dutch philosopher, metaphysician, and one of the most advanced scientists of his day, Van Helsing's ability to recognize Dracula as a vampire, and eventually spearhead the plan to defeat him, is actually depicted as just a lucky byproduct of his vast worldly knowledge. In the book, he is initially summoned for his expertise on diseases, not for any monster-hunting accolades. But that hasn't stopped adaptations over the years from changing the common perception of Van Helsing into that of an expert in vampires, and Dracula's most persistent mortal enemy. Why is it Van Helsing who has so commonly filled this role, and not any of the other men that make up the novel's core group of heroes? Perhaps the answer lies in the movies. Edward Van Sloan not only portrayed Van Helsing in Todd Browning's 1931 classic film Dracula, the first official cinematic adaptation of Stoker's novel, but he also reprised the role for the 1936 sequel, Dracula's Daughter, the only character from the original movie to return. This may have sealed in audiences' minds the idea of Van Helsing as an especially important character in Dracula lore. Sure enough, this notion would continue when the famous British studio Hammer Films would follow suit decades later with their Dracula series, with horror legend Peter Cushing playing Van Helsing not only in 1958's Horror of Dracula, but also in the similarly Dracula-free sequel, Brides of Dracula. The idea of Van Helsing as not only an accidental adversary of Dracula, but a full-fledged enemy of all vampires, was now cemented in culture. And, sure enough, depictions of the heroic doctor not only became a key element of adaptations of Stoker's novel, but started to pop up in various other vampire or monster-related media. And, just like the Count himself, Van Helsing too was frequently reinvented or reinterpreted to fit the needs of whichever property he, or even in some cases she, appeared in. If Dracula's Daughter was, then, a key moment in making Van Helsing an even more legendary character than he was before, it's also notably a crucial film in the birth of a very important cinematic legacy. It was one of the first direct sequels in Universal's then burgeoning monster movie trend, preceded only by The Bride of Frankenstein the year before. Those two films, along with a number of other monster-related movies Universal was unleashing into the world in the late 30s and early 40s, such as The Wolfman, The Invisible Man, and The Mummy, showed the studio saw great potential in these horrific nightmare creations as one of their key money-making ventures. But Universal would really make history in 1943 when, hoping to keep interest alive in the already arguably overly prolific Universal monster trend, the studio decided to cross over two of the franchises, with Frankenstein meets The Wolfman. While critics of the time were underwhelmed by the on-screen matchup of these two famous monsters, the movie certainly caught the imagination of the young audience it was aimed for, and its success led to a number of subsequent monster rally films, in which Universal's most famous monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman, would encounter each other, either to team up or, more often, do battle. Today, this era of the Universal monsters is commonly regarded as one of the first shared cinematic universes, a business model now regularly chased by just about every major Hollywood studio there is. And while Universal's original Universal Monsters franchise would gradually peter out in the late 40s to mid-50s, the studio clearly continued to see the IP potential of these monsters, continuously merchandising them and presenting them as theme park attractions throughout the decades, as well as occasionally bringing them back to screens. But it was the mega success of 1999's blockbuster reimagining of The Mummy that finally got Universal wondering if maybe it wasn't once again time to give the whole cinematic universe approach with the monsters another try. And yet, when it came time to decide on which character to kick it off with, it was not one of the monsters themselves that was chosen. but rather yet another new interpretation of the man who pop culture had spent the last 6 decades transforming into their most hated common enemy. The year is 2004, and Universal Pictures is ready to reintroduce the Universal monsters to the world and kickstart a new blockbuster horror action franchise with Van Helsing.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, ready to sink my teeth into Kate, my claws into Hugh, and then discuss this movie in depth with you.
Oh, that was sweet.
It was, right?
I'm glad you added the Hugh part and only didn't just talk about Kate, so this wasn't too creepy. You know, the fact that you were like, you know, you're covering all your bases, that's good.
I'm an equal opportunist.
Yeah. But, you know, after this actually works out fairly perfect. This is the beginning of a 2-month event for us, Chris. Our Curse of the Dark Universe, where we're going to be looking at, you know, Universal's ill-fated attempts to once again get their Universal Monsters franchise going. Certainly we can talk about that in a larger sense. But it's also interesting that we didn't even realize we had like kind of a perfect lead into this episode, because we went from Dylan Dog to, I would say, just a slightly more famous monster hunter.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, Van Helsing. The film we're talking about today is 2004's Van Helsing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it, Chris?
Sure. It is written and directed by Stephen Sommers, most famous for The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, the Brendan Fraser franchise in the late 90s. The budget of Van Helsing is $160 million. Domestically, it made $120 million, and worldwide, it made $300 million. So, not exactly what they needed to do to create the franchise. Usually, our rule of thumb always is you got to double your budget. So this didn't quite do that. But I have to say this because I like my numbers. The North American DVD sales for this film hit $65 million in the first week. So it actually made a lot of money in home video.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, which we'll get to.
No, this was a movie I remember hanging on kind of in a video sense, but it is at the same time, and again, I guess we could talk about this a little later, you can look at this film and say, okay, this ended up eking a little bit of a profit, but was that profit and just the overall reputation enough for them to still move forward with the sequel? And obviously not. And so that's what we'll talk about. You know, why would they have still been hesitant? But in terms of like how this movie goes about happening, you know, almost as like Frankenstein's monster itself. This is a movie that's definitely like an assemblage of very calculated pieces put together. And you can kind of look at like every element of this and place it in time and understand why this movie happened the way it did. Now, I think for a long time, Universal has, at least there's always been certain parties at Universal who have understood the appeal and the potential of the Universal monsters as an easy kind of thing for them to go back to. But for a long time, they just weren't seeming to capitalize on it. You know, they would trot out Dracula once in a while for like, you know, like projects here and there, things like that. But they weren't trying to get the franchise kind of going again. And you already mentioned something. There's a big sea change in that movement in the late 90s. In particular, I believe it's 1999, correct?
Correct.
When
yes.
we get The Mummy from Stephen Sommers. Now, my memory of The Mummy was that it was a surprise massive hit. Like, obviously, it was a summer blockbuster. It was, you know, positioned that way. But I think it was bigger than anyone expected it to be. Everyone just loved it. Like, everyone just fell in love with it, including me. Like, that was a movie I remember especially when it hit DVD, a buddy and I watched it twice in one day. We got the DVD and watched it, and we're like, that was really good. You want to just watch it again? You know, it was just a movie that people were kind of instantly taken with. I'm sorry, I know you were about to say something. But.
Oh, no. I'm piggybacking off what you're saying. The Mummy is iconic at this point. Brendan Fraser himself is kind of having a resurgence lately on the internet. But The Mummy was a movie that I think that style of film, that Indiana Jones feel, that had been lost for a while now. This is pre Pirates of the Caribbean at this point too. So this was kind of the first hit. And what you said, it was a surprise because the first one was made for a modest, in Hollywood terms, $80 million, but it grossed over $400 million. worldwide, and then spawned the sequel that made, again, over 400 million as well, about 435 million. I don't know the budget on that one, but I'm assuming it's a little bit more than the first one. Of course, you got to pay for that rock CGI Scorpion. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's still a high point in cinema history.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as much as I like criticize like Lucas and these filmmakers who go back and keep tinkering with their films, there's this part of me that goes like, can't Sommers go back to The Mummy Returns and like just make that look a little bit better, so we could like, you know, watch that now and not feel as like ugh when it gets to that point? Because I do like The Mummy Returns.
Oh fuck yeah!
I know people say it's like the weaker one, and it obviously is, but it's still pretty fun. But you do get to that scene, you're like, oh yeah, like there's this at the end. But,
oh yeah. It's I love Returns, but there's a I'm gonna shout out a YouTube channel that I like called VFX Artists React. I think they're Corridor Crew, and they actually did a video of like fixing the special effect. I think they use a deep fake, but it's interesting to see. Just like absolutely tinker with that one, please. Because I like Returns a lot. I like the pygmy monkey or monkeys, the pygmy mummies.
The pygmy mummies are great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun as shit, man. I like that movie.
I'm gonna throw out a hot take here, Chris. I don't hate Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. I said it. I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
So
I think it's watchable.
That, my friend, and you know what I'm about to say, but that, my friend, is the one and only movie that I actually stopped. I've never finished Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. I got to the part where the Yetis come down the mountain and she screams for them to like help their family, and then I was like, you know what? I got better things to do today.
But did you really? Probably not. I mean, no offense, but
no. I mean, I'm here on this podcast right now. I have nothing better to do in my life.
Yeah, no, give it a second shot. I don't even like the Yeti scene. I know it's a very like mocked scene. It's interesting, like the passage of time. What happens? I think this happens with like a lot of stuff where something will be so mocked, and then so much like worse stuff follows in the years after, where you look back on it with this like level of quaintness and go like, wow, I can't believe people were like that angry about like that Yeti scene, because we've seen so much stupider stuff since then.
Absolutely.
But I think once you get past the Yeti scene, there's some fun stuff in the third act. I mean, if you stick through it, you get Michelle Yeoh versus Jet Li. Again, not like the most exciting version of that fight you've always dreamt of seeing in a real Hong Kong martial arts movie, but still something, you know.
I think I was just so mad that Rachel Weisz didn't come back. I was so mad.
Yeah, I mean, I like the little joke they have about that at the beginning of the movie. But anyways, we're not here to talk about Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. We're here to talk about Stephen Sommers. And what we should mention is that you said, so not only is the Mummy it's like huge hit, a surprising hit, but it really kind of reconfigures how Universal can look at the Universal monsters, because you just mentioned how this was like before Pirates, but it really is that same template. And in fact, I often say to people that beyond like all the obvious stuff of recent years, like the MCU stuff and things like that, when in my head of like my era of growing up, like a certain time in my life, what would I point to is like the three kind of summer blockbusters that I say perfectly nailed the formula. I will often defer to Men in Black, The Mummy, and the first Pirates film. I think all three of those are like just perfect summer blockbusters. Like every piece is together, just they all came together, in just such a magical way. But I think Universal looks at The Mummy, which was kind of this reinvention of The Mummy. You know, if you go back to the original Universal monster films, the Mummy ones were very kind of slow, kind of like pondering. They were not serial-esque adventure films. And Stephen Sommers takes The Mummy and basically makes it into something of an Indiana Jones clone. And suddenly, because that makes so much money, I think Universal and Sommers are both aware, the Universal monsters don't have to be horror. They can actually be big 4-quadrant adventure films. And so obviously you realize, right as soon as that, especially the weekend box office for Mummy Returns, which I believe had like the second highest opening of all time when it opened after Lost World, I guarantee you the next day, all the departments of Universal rushing around going, well, how could we do this with Dracula? How could we do this with Frankenstein? Right? And of course, the person they're going to turn to is Stephen Sommers. So when I say all this is calculated by the time, Stephen Sommers, clearly he's going to be the guy. And he even says, like right there, I know you and I both looked at some production notes for this film.
Yep.
And he's on record as saying, people have been kidding me saying, hey, you did The Mummy, so when are you going to do Dracula? But that seemed limiting and already done. So I was thinking that it would be cool if all of the classic Universal monsters could be brought together somehow. So that's what he keys in on. Now, we can talk, I guess we can say this right now because it's independent of our thoughts of this film. maybe a slight miscalculation. Wouldn't you think, to just kind of jump right from the Mummy into saying, let's just mash them all together? Because you're kind of giving yourself nowhere to go after that.
I think at the time, no, but in a pre MCU world, I think that was okay. I think because now we have 13 years of like an MCU world building, or like leading up to a team up. I understand what they were doing for this idea. Now, absolutely not. There's no way that we get a team up right away and branch out from there, a la Justice League.
Right.
I think that especially has shown that it's not going to happen ever again. But back in the 90s, or sorry, early 2000s, I can see there was no template at that point.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying in retrospect, I think you can look back and say, well, geez, what would have Van Helsing 2 have been if you've kind of already burnt like all the monsters off, you know?
True.
And here, okay, and last thing I'll say about this before we start talking about some other like pieces of this puzzle. Here's what I think is the other miscalculation, and I've always said this. I've been consistent about this since 2004. You know what the other problem with Van Helsing is? It shouldn't have been Van Helsing. What they should have done is this should have been Rick O'Connell versus the other monsters.
Oh, totally.
Like how they didn't see that potential, right? Instead of saying, okay, we've done 2 Mummy movies with Rick O'Connell. At this point, people still love Brendan Fraser. You're riding off the high of Mummy Returns. Instead of like waiting a bunch of time and do a third Mummy movie where, like, as you said, like not everybody comes back and you don't have the same villain anymore. I just remember saying, like, Rick O'Connell is this perfect character to have him now end up fighting Dracula, or have him now end up encountering the Invisible Man or whatever, right? That's where I think if they had done that, I mean, this is a total speculative. Who knows? But in my mind, that just sounds so much better than. But what
that's Universal not recognizing what they have, right? Like all movie studios do, they recognize a portion of what they have, and not the rest. And I think they wanted their classic monsters to stay classic. So they're like, we got to keep it in the early 1900s or whatever, right? Like it's I bet I wonder how many meetings were around that. Cuz you're right, it is so obvious. But the Mummy's takes place in the 20s?
Yeah. 20s or 30s, yeah.
Yeah, so they're probably like, "Oh, we can't go back. Dracula can't be there." And then all of a sudden, like, Blade Trinity comes out. You know, Dracula's like walking down from a magazine cover.
Not only that, like even the original Universal monster movies are kind of indeterminate in time, and I think I think some of them are even just taking place in the 30s and 40s. So they'd already if you might be right, but it already shows how they don't even maybe know their own history.
Yeah.
And like the potential of these monsters. When you're talking about Dracula can exist in any time period. There's no reason he can't be in Rick O'Connell's time. So whatever, just a little blunder there. I know you and I are probably both going to want to talk about the decisions Stephen Sommers makes in terms of the character of Van Helsing. We can maybe save that for the movie itself.
Sure.
But in terms of casting, he says that once he makes this decision, right, he decides, okay, well, my natural follow-up to The Mummy and Mummy Returns is I'm going to do this like big monster mashup. I need a hero. And so he clues in on Van Helsing. He says like, oh, like the original monster hunter, right? And he says that the entire time he's writing the film and kind of putting it together, he only has one actor in mind. And this is, again, where I say, place this in time. The actor he picks is Hugh Jackman. And this made so much sense at the time because this goes back to something we don't see anymore, but I know you and I have talked about. We kind of miss this era. The era of when a star is suddenly born and right away, like there's like a scramble to get them the next big franchise, right? This was going to be, Van Helsing was very much meant to be the anointing of Hugh Jackman to that next level after he pops as Wolverine in the X-Men films.
Yeah.
So you have that, like, X-Men hits, then you get, like, Swordfish, and it's like, man, this guy is really going places, and so everyone's going to swoop in and be like, well, we got to snap him up and get, like, the other big thing with him. And you don't really see that anymore. Like, this is, like, the tail end of that era of the big movie stars. I think Hugh Jackman's one of the last ones who kind of, like, sidles into that. Like, so, for instance, as we're recording this, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings just had, like, a big opening weekend, and I'm very, like, that's great for the film. I'm very happy for Simu Liu, who is the star of that. But I don't think that's going to make him necessarily a movie star, right? No. I mean, like the Shang-Chi films, he'll obviously continue to do well in those and Avenger films, but I don't think there's going to be like a mad rush to get him like another big franchise. That's kind of not how it works anymore. This was definitely like, oh, okay, people liked him as Wolverine. Now he gets to be Van Helsing. And I remember like a big part of the hype for this film was everyone being excited because everyone was like really ready for this guy to be a big star. Where were you at on Hugh Jackman back in 2004? I'm guessing, just like I said, probably pretty excited about him.
Oh, dude, I was 16 years old, and X-Men was like, Wolverine was my favorite character, and yeah, Hugh Jackman was like my guy. Like I ate up everything he was in. Like I was a huge fan of him, still am. Honestly, I still am a big fan. I think he's mega talented, and he's shown that he is not just claws and muscles. He's really everything. I think that the moment that clicked in was his Oscars performance, the opening to the Oscars. I know we don't like the Oscars, but his opening to the Oscars is fantastic. Look it up.
No, he was great. It bumps me out he only hosted once because he was so good.
These are the Oscars, and this is my dream. I am a slumdog, I am a wrestler, I'll rent the arena. I'm Wolverine.
Big time show, a big showman, and I was all aboard the Jackman train.
Yep.
I was jacked up.
As were all of our moms. The moms of the world love Hugh Jackman. There might be no actor more loved by moms than Hugh Jackman, I think. Yes. Moms and now oddly enough, TikTokers. TikTok people love the greatest. Did you know the Greatest Showman is like a huge TikTok thing?
I did know this. I know this especially because that song is that it totally escaped me. I never saw the movie, but I know the song is really catchy. So.
Mm-hmm. And then the other final not final. There's other actors, but I mean obviously we'll talk about just the key trio of players here. And to this too, this to me feels somewhat calculated. Now, I don't know because I'm looking at the timing of this. Right, I think there's some. I mean, so for the female lead here, what's the great character name? Anna Valerius. At the time this came out, we would have said Gypsy, but we will say Romani, kind of descendant of a Romanian family, cursed to fight Dracula forever. They cast Kate Beckinsale. And why that's significant is she is also coming off of one of the biggest hits of her career, kind of a star-making moment in a big kind of mainstream way. And more specifically, another vampire movie.
Yeah.
And it's just I remember that was already kind of a punchline when this film came out. It's like, oh, she's going right from playing a vampire to playing a vampire hunter, kind of showing like what range, right? The ultimate range. She just played Celine in Underworld. Now she gets to play Anna Valerius in Van Helsing. So that just, do you think like that had to be like, that's no coincidence, right? That they were like, it's not just that she was in a recent like successful action movie. It's that in particular she had just done horror action.
Oh, it's completely calculated. And let me remind you, Chris was 16 years old when this movie came out. And once again, all aboard the Beckinsale train when this came out. I was a huge Underworld fan when that was released. I actually remember the day I watched that movie with a buddy of mine and realizing like how much I was into gothic horror at that point. So she was cast in this, and yeah.
I mean, you say you're 16. When Underworld came out, I was 20. I was, around that feeling the same way. Or no, I was 23. I am 40 today. That Beckinsale train can still take off from the station. Let me tell you, that's not much has changed. In fact, this has nothing to do with the performance. We can just say it now. I was struck watching Van Helsing. I recently watched Jolt, like her newest movie. Wasn't a huge fan of it, but I was just struck by like watching this. As like, wow, that's just the exact same person. Talk about just someone who just does not age.
She actually just might be a vampire.
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah,
Which is like it's a
amazing.
bummer. That's why she doesn't want to play Celine anymore. She should just keep doing it for like 30 more years.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, so now to me, what a calculated movie, right? Oh, we're gonna bring back all the monsters. We're gonna get the guy who just directed 2 huge hits based on the Universal monsters. We're gonna get this new emerging star coming from a nerdy property. Right? Oh, the comic book fans love him, so they'll probably come over to this one as well. Let's put him in the lead role. Let's bring this actress over from a recent big hit vampire action movie, and let's mash it all together. What could go wrong? And I will say, Chris, as you know, and this has been talked about on this show before, and that's why I'm very excited for the next 2 months, I'm a huge horror fan. So it can't be understated how excited 23-year-old Trevor was to go see this movie. Like, I was really looking forward to this. I remember the teaser trailers being kind of exciting. There wasn't like much to them, but that image of like Hugh Jackman coming out of the mist, like in the costume, the silhouette of him. A lot of the posters just being that silhouette. and just the goodwill coming off of, like I said, there was that Scorpion King CGI, but beyond that, still Stephen Sommers riding a lot of goodwill at this point. This Hugh Jackman being fucking this emerging star who was just so great as Wolverine. I was all in for this. I thought there was like no way this could be bad. Like, did you see this in the theater? Do you remember kind of like how you felt at this time? Like, how excited were you? Or
Oh yeah, I'll get to that.
okay,
I have a little bit. I have an anecdote.
okay. So do you have anything more to say about like the build up to this, or should we just get into it?
I think let's just go to the movie.
All right, man.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
And Helsing, you murderer!
Why can't you tell the world I work for you?
Because we do not exist.
My life, my job, my curse is to vanquish evil.
We need you to go to the east, to the far side of Romania, a land that is home to legendary creatures.
I see the Wolfman hasn't killed you yet.
Don't worry, he's getting to it.
Lorded over by Count Dracula.
It is a place where nightmares come to life.
I'm Helsing.
He's the first one to kill a vampire in over 100 years. I'd say that earned him a drink.
Now, a man without a past
Do you have any family, Mr. Van Helsing?
I hope to find out someday. It's what keeps me going.
will face an enemy that never dies.
In 1462, Dracula was banished to an icy fortress.
And then the devil gave him wings.
And uncover a secret he never imagined.
Castle Dracula.
Hello, Gabriel. We have such history, you and I.
How do you know me?
From the director of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns.
Oh my God.
Hugh Jackman. Kate Beckinsale.
How do I kill him?
No one knows how to kill Dracula.
If you're late, run like hell.
Don't be late.
Van Helsing, a film by Stephen Sommers.
Famed monster slayer Gabriel Van Helsing is dispatched to Transylvania to assist the last of the Valerius bloodline in defeating the evil Count Dracula. Anna Valerius reveals that Dracula and his brides have formed an unholy alliance with werewolves and Frankenstein's monster, hellbent on exacting a centuries-old curse on her family. Together, Anna and Van Helsing set out to destroy their common enemy, but uncover Dracula's ultimate nefarious plan along the way.
Yep. Van Helsing. I walk into the theater, so ready for this. Sit down, got my popcorn, maybe it was nachos. I don't know, it's a long time ago. And I was like, come on, bring it on. How could this not be good? And for about 6 minutes, I'm like, see? Told you, this is great, and I'll get to that. And then the film kind of keeps going. It proceeds to keep going for, I think, the next 4 days, I think is about how long this movie lasted for me. I just felt my heart just continually sink. You know, there's a lot of discussion in this movie about, you know, beating hearts and who doesn't have a heart. By the end of this movie, mine was just completely withered and dead. This movie really took it out of me back then. I've gone a very long time without revisiting it. And there was that part of me that wondered, okay, now coming back to it, you know, would I be more forgiving now? As I said, sometimes you look back on things and you go like, wow, maybe I was like a little harsh. The other night, I finally revisited this for the first time in a couple of decades. And no, I still think this is garbage. And I'm looking forward to talking about why. This is such a frustrating movie because, like we said, like the concept at its heart is... it should be can't miss. And this makes so many miscalculations along the way. And I'm looking forward to like kind of pointing those all out. And I have a couple positives to say, but in general, this one just does not do it for me.
Okay. Do you have your phone by you, Trev?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to send you something.
Okay.
All live on the air here.
Okay.
And you're gonna then describe it to our listeners.
Okay. I've received an image, and I see my good buddy Chris, my podcast co-host, with his widescreen DVD of Van Helsing, giving an old big thumbs up. And do you want me to describe the DVD as well? Because, boy, that is a pretty amazing Photoshop cover there.
Yes, go ahead. And for our listeners, we'll probably throw this up on the Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, we definitely will. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, not again. This was maybe the earlier days of the DVD deciding not to use like one of the theatrical posters, but instead just a bad photoshopped image of Hugh Jackman shooting one of his special vampire killing crossbows at something off in the horizon with a concerned looking Kate Beckinsale standing behind him. So it looks like someone just told her what this film is going to do to her career. And then a poorly illustrated vampire hovering above them. Van Helsing.
All right. So I own this movie, and that's an old DVD, which means I bought that probably for $35. Okay. I have held this secret from Trev for probably, how long have we known each other now? 7 years?
Yeah, about that.
Okay, so 7 years. And then over a year ago, he comes to me with this idea for this podcast and, starts about these failed movies, and these movies are just such garbage. And he's such a horror fan, right? So, and I've known this about him his whole, our whole friendship. He mentions a few titles and mentions Van Helsing and, what a piece of shit and all this. And I'm just like tight-lipped. Okay. I love this movie.
Oh no, that's what I was getting concerned. That's where you're heading.
Okay.
Now let me ask you a question. Like before you go,
okay.
Because this is like. You love this movie the way you love Wild Wild West? Do you love this movie like the way you love like Speed Racer? Like what's going on here? Like, do you understand what this movie is and still love it, or are you like, what's Trevor talking about? This is a good movie.
I think okay. I'll let you
because this movie is, by the way, hot trash. By the way, like.
Oh man. Okay. So I was so excited. I've been holding the secret. Okay, I love it. I used to work at the movie theater. Mm-hmm. So, and it was one of my first jobs, and like I said, a 16-year-old Chris, sorry. And I thought this was going to be a really I was so looking forward to this episode, man, because it's from two very, very different perspectives, okay? So, like I mentioned, I was 16 years old. We have about a 10-year age gap. You're a huge horror aficionado. Like, you're one of the... a lot. And I am the blockbuster guy. I saw this at a staff screening. So when you used to work at the movie theater, the night or two before we'd get the print, and then we'd just show it just to the staff. And like I remember just like loving the movie. And I had the fucking poster on my wall, Trev. I thought I still had the poster. I went through all my old movie theater posters, like the double-sided ones that you get from the theater. Mm-hmm. I looked through everything. I don't have it anymore, but that picture would have been glorious. And I'm so mad I can't find it. So I think I may have tossed it. I know you're happy about that. I loved it when I was 16. I've seen it many, many times in between. And then I watched it 2 days ago, and I have a blast with this movie.
But I mean, like, so, because you just mentioned the thing about how, like, I'm the horror guy and you're a blockbuster guy, right? So let me seriously ask you, though, because, like, there's no question, I don't think even you would deny that this is, like, as horror movie, like, this is just a complete miss.
Yeah.
But that's also, like, it's not what it's trying to be, right? This is not a horror movie at the end of it. There's no sense of it, right? But I guess my question to you is, you don't look at this and honestly think that this is also just a huge misfire as a blockbuster? Because I do. I think this is just... you compare this to like the Mummy films, like we said, the first two Mummy movies. You compare it to the things we just talked about, like, for me, like Pirates, or these kind of like, Jurassic Park, which I know is your favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. And
you don't look at this and look at like the pacing of it and like, the overall structure and say like, ooh, this one is just like missing the mark. Like this one really does it for you. I mean,
I think that you word it like that. I think this movie is trying to be the total opposite of high art. I think this movie knows exactly what it is. It's loud. It's kind of obnoxious. It's not subtle. It's not trying to be high art. It's like a theme park ride. that you just gobble up your popcorn and then you leave and you forget about it immediately. I think The Mummy was trying to be a real movie. I believe that. I think The Mummy's a real movie. Jurassic Park's a real movie. You know, those blockbusters, yeah, of course. Those are fucking 4-star movies all day long. But this one, I think, it's one of those... I went to go look at Roger Ebert's review. Mm-hmm. And because we were big fans of him and his writing, and he gave this movie 3 stars out of 4, and he said, "Fuck, I wrote it down. Did I lose it? Are you looking it up?"
No, I'm looking up something else to respond to your nonsense with.
Let me keep this in. He said, "At the outset, we may fear Sommers is simply going for VFX overload, but by the end, he has somehow succeeded in assembling all his monsters and plot threads into a high-voltage climax. Van Helsing is silly and spectacular and fun." And that's kind of where I'm coming from. This movie is so silly.
Okay, before you put too much stock in that opinion, let me just remind you that Roger Ebert also gave 3 stars to Garfield and Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties. And his Garfield: A Tale of Two Kitties review, just for the record, just because I have to say this, I can't bring this up and not mention, the headline of that review is called Doppelpussy. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So like Roger Ebert, I loved his writing, but that dude was crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
I wish I could agree with you, but actually I don't. I have a hard time agreeing with you. I don't think Stephen Sommers and the other people involved. There's one performer in this that I think is on the wavelength you're describing, and it's like he's the highlight for me, and you might even guess who it is. Mm-hmm. But I think like Hugh Jackman's not giving the sort of performance that I think leans into what you're describing. I think he's very much trying to give like a real kind of look at me, I'm the new action star performance, and I think it's at odds with what the film is the way you're describing it. I think the movie itself has kind of a high opinion of itself. I think I don't look at someone who made The Mummy and Mummy Returns turning around and saying, well, the next one I do is just going to be like complete trash. I think Stephen Sommers is a guy who looks at, you know, high concept genre stuff like Deep Rising, like The Mummy, or like Van Helsing, and always sees a way to make it into a big blockbuster. But I don't think he was trying to make like a camp movie here as much as he's just kind of falling on his face trying to make an actual serious like gothic adventure film.
Think of it this way. He went from this to G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. So he's on that trajectory. That's why I'm more. Yeah, you know
the trajectory is bad. It's bad. You go from Mummy Returns to Van Helsing to G.I. Joe. It's like you're just getting worse and worse.
That's fair.
He's losing it, man.
But remember, we watched in one of our movie nights, we watched Rise of Cobra, and it was like just like a fun, stupid time.
But you were having more fun. Again, I guess this is a steal. You were having more fun than I did. I don't think that movie's like much of a fun, stupid time. I think that movie's like not even memorable. This movie might at least be somewhat memorable in its badness. As I revisited it, there were certain things that I was like, oh yeah, I've never forgotten this because you know there's some interesting imagery to this. I will say though, and I am curious to hear what you think about this because I know you and I talk about like the visual appeal of movies sometimes. This is like a big discussion we had about Solo. I think this is like a really ugly movie. I think, you know, it's particularly, like, I guess I understand it can't be as colorful as The Mummy because it's a different vibe. Obviously, when you're doing a Dracula movie, a lot of it has to be at night. Yeah. But I think this movie is, like, so visually drab that's, like, a big, like, downer for me as well. And again, it, like, hurts, like, the fun tone you're talking about. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of shocked. But then again, you're stupid, so I'm not that surprised.
No, like I felt like okay, so like the look of it, I agree that it's like looks kind of ugly, but I like that it's like that real like sets. It felt like it's got that classic feel like of just like we're all on sets and doing stuff. It's got that charm to it, and it feels like when you're walking. I don't know if you've ever been to Universal Studios or Disneyland or whatever. Yeah. You're walking through the rides areas, and it looks like that. It looks like you could walk down as a tourist and look around and see all the shit on the wall. And like see all like the performers, like the little minions of Dracula walking around and shit, and the sparks flying.
Oh yes, I'm so happy. Finally, over 100 years after its publication, finally someone made the Dracula movie I was always waiting for. One where he has little demonic Oompa Loompas that work for him for some reason. What the hell is that? The movie doesn't even know what they are. It can barely explain it.
They're putting the machine together, man.
Yeah, but what? Why? Why does he have little demon Oompa Loompas? Why? Why couldn't those just be other vampires?
Okay. Before we go any further, We should set up a little bit more of the plot, because we always get wrapped up in this, and sometimes, okay, so let's explain here that the evil plot. So like we said before...
Yeah, the evil plot. You're exactly right. From the evil screenplay.
Okay, hold on. This is gonna be like Solo, except you're mad at me. So Anna is... Her family's been killed by Dracula over the years, and it's found out that... Oh, yeah, Frankenstein's made. So the Frankenstein's monster's made, sorry. And Dracula wants Frankenstein's monster because he's the cure to, or the spark of life, would you say?
I guess. Like, it's not explained very well. Yeah.
No, it's not. But he's like kind of like the spark of life, like I said. Because what's found out later is that Dracula and his 3 brides over, 400 years have amassed, thousands and thousands of spawns. Okay? But they're all dead because they're dead. And they...
Yeah, and they're born in these giant egg sacs. The movie misses an excellent opportunity to show one of the brides squatting down and, like, laying one of those egg sacs, Well,
that would have been on Trev's top 10. So...
Cronenberg would have done it. Cronenberg's Van Helsing would have delivered.
But to bring them back to life, he has to get Frankenstein's monster to put him in this machine to then spark them alive, and then they would stay alive. And then he would take over the world, okay? And Van Helsing needs to thwart that plot. Mm-hmm. It is stupid, it's silly, but weirdly in like, me, I'm Mr. Rules guy, and logically in this maybe illogical movie, I was never bothered by it. I was like, yeah, okay, this is so stupid,
Well, I'll get to some rules stuff, and I'll try and catch you on it, Mr. Rules guy. But
okay.
Let's talk about, because okay, so that's the plot, and I'm sure we'll have more stuff to say. Let's talk about Van Helsing. Let's talk about the man of the hour. Mm-hmm. So Abraham Van Helsing, the traditional literary character as we know him, played by such great actors as Edward Van Sloan in the original Bela Lugosi Dracula. We get the Peter Cushing version throughout the Hammer films. Anthony Hopkins, a great Van Helsing in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Just a character I love, and obviously a lot of interpretations of him. This is a big reinvention. So I want to read a quote from Stephen Sommers talking about his approach to Van Helsing. And I want you to listen to this quote, Chris, which I'm sure you've already read, but I want you to listen to it and tell me if this sounds like someone who thinks he's making like a silly trash camp movie, or if this is a guy who thinks he's like the fucking coolest and thinks he's like a badass, right? Because he says, I read the book about 20 years ago. In Stoker's novel, Van Helsing is 60 years old and his first name is Abraham. He's been a character in countless movies, but no one's ever done a movie centered on him. That's not true. I needed to find a way to make him my own. I changed his first name to Gabriel, and I made him younger and cooler. In a sense, I made my Van Helsing the younger brother to Stoker's character. He's now working for an ancient secret society as a bounty hunter. He's a gun for hire, a mercenary who's out to vanquish evil, and Count Dracula is evil incarnate, so he makes a very attractive quarry for Van Helsing. I hear that, and that's where I start to it's like a trigger warning where I'm like, oh, this is a movie that's all about posturing and thinking it's cool. And that's the problem with this version of Van Helsing. And I'll tell you where I first see that, where the movie starts to fall apart for me in 2 ways. And this is going to attach to both my problem with the Van Helsing character and a big problem with the film that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, because you were just talking about how you like the practicality of the sets. I mentioned earlier that I like the first about 5 minutes of this. The opening of this film kicks ass. The black and white prologue is so good.
Yeah.
And that part is exactly what you're talking about. That part is like all high camp. It feels like it's trying to be campy and trying to be like a tribute to the old monster movies and have this just total sense of fun. And it's focused on the performer I was talking about earlier, who I love in this actually, is Richard Roxburgh as Dracula. I think that's a guy who's no pun intended, sinking his teeth into this movie, and he gets the assignment, right? He knows what this movie should be. Then you cut from that opening, which I think is so cool, and then you immediately go to this sequence of Van Helsing hunting Mr. Hyde. And right away I have 2 problems. The first problem, Mr. Hyde is this terrible CGI creation, and that will continue to be a problem throughout the film. This is a movie with such bad, embarrassing CGI. I know we were talking about the Scorpion King thing. That's one scene in that movie. This movie is full of it. And there's so many instances in this where you're just why can't that just be a practical monster? Mr. Hyde's a great example. Why not just get a guy and put him in prosthetics and makeup? Why does it have to be completely CGI and it's so bad? So that bugs me. And then during that sequence, Van Helsing reaches into his coat and pulls out these spinning razor blades. And as soon as he does that, I'm like, oh, so that's what this movie is, right? This is a movie about like, dude, look at my Van Helsing fucking wears a long leather trench coat and has spinning razor blades. Isn't that badass? This to me isn't like silly. This is like, I'm trying to be cool. So I know I said a lot there, but thoughts?
You're not wrong. But I guess, yeah, that is cool.
Oh man,
like
you're too easy to please, Chris. I
No,
know if
no.
I jangle, I know we talk about, you're Mr. Blockbuster guy. If I jangle like keys in front of your face, you get distracted. But
yeah. No, it was like, again, I'm not coming at this movie with the history of the character at all. Honestly, I will tell you, this was my first introduction into this character ever, was this movie. So I'm not bringing in any baggage whatsoever. So when I watched it, again, it's almost like he's kind of like a James Bond, like he's got gadgets and stuff, and when you go to the Vatican later and they go to the secret society underneath the Vatican and they kind of like are walking him around and showing him stuff.
Ah, there you are. Well, did you bring Mr. Hyde back or did you kill him? You killed him, didn't you? That's why they get so annoyed. When they ask you to bring someone back, they don't mean as a corpse. Oh, all right, you're in the mood. Well, come on. I've got a few things that'll put the bit back in your mouth. Oh, any idiot can make a sword. Oh, sorry, Father.
Come along, Carl.
Here, take this. Rings of garlic. Holy water. Silver steak. Crucifix.
Why can't I have one of those?
You've never gone after vampires before now, have you?
Vampires, gargoyles, warlocks, they're all the same. Best when cooked well.
No. They're not all the same. A vampire is nothing like a warlock. My granny could kill a warlock.
Oh, you've never even been out of the Abbey. How do you know about vampires?
I read. Ah, here's something new. Glycerin, 48. Sorry.
In the name of Allah, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, around here is thick with envy. Ah, this is my latest invention. It's gas-propelled, capable of catapulting arrows in rapid succession at tremendous velocity. Just pull the trigger and hold on. Now, I've heard the stories coming out of Transylvania. Trust me, you'll need this. Work of certifiable genius.
If you don't say so yourself.
No, I did say so myself. A veritable cornucopia of talent.
Did you invent this?
Well, I've been working on that for 12 years. It's compressed magma from Mount Vesuvius with pure alkaline from the Gobi Desert. One of a kind.
What's it for?
Oh, I don't know, but I'm sure it'll come in handy.
12 years, you don't know what it does?
I didn't say that. I said I didn't know what it's for. What it does is to create a light source equal to the intensity of the sun.
Well, this will come in handy how?
Oh, I don't know. You could blind your enemies, charve roil a herd of charging wildebeest. Use your imagination.
No, Carl. I'm going to use yours. That's why you're coming with me.
Oh, the hell be damned I am.
You cursed. Not very well, mind you, but you're a monk. You shouldn't curse at all.
Actually, I'm still just a friar. I can curse all I want. Damn it.
It's James Bond in Q. And like, that's fine by me. Again, I'm not going into it with any baggage. I don't know that Van Helsing is like this 60-year-old, old guy.
But I don't know that you need baggage to understand a bad character or a bad movie when you see it. You didn't know anything about Dylan Dog either, and you still knew that was a bad movie. So that's why I'm kind of like,
I had some positive things to say about that movie.
Well, I have some positive things to say about this too. But I mean, I'm making the point that my complaints on this aren't entirely focused on the fact that it reinvents Van Helsing. I'm all for that. Look, this, as I said, Dracula's published in like 1897. The only way these characters can survive is if they're continually reinvented.
Sure.
I just recently loved the Netflix Dracula miniseries from Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, which reinvented Van Helsing as Abigail Van Helsing, and things like that, and kind of started off as a nun. Stuff like that. I'm all for. I think it's just that the problem with the reinvention of him in this is that, first of all, I don't think he's very compelling. I think Hugh Jackman is actually really boring in this. I think it's a bad performance. Obviously, I'm guessing you don't agree, but I think this is like such a static, like you compare like his charisma as Wolverine to him in this. And partly that's the way the character's written, because there's this whole thing where he doesn't know his past, and he's kind of like befuddled by his past the whole film. The film kind of forgets to resolve any of that, but he's just like this blank slate, and he's boring. And beyond that, their solution to reinventing him is just to make him cool. And like, I guess that works for you, but not for me. I just like, that's like annoying to me. That it's just like, dude, like our Van Helsing has fucking spinning razor blades. Isn't that the best? It's like, no, give me more than that. Give me like something compelling. Like, and especially if none of the action is going to be that exciting, which it's not. I don't know.
You don't like any of the action at all? Come on.
It's all so CGI and bad. Like, what
Not
would you say?
Exactly though.
What would you say are like the fun action sequences in this?
I think the carriage chase is awesome between the two carriages with all the horses and stuff, and then the vampire bride's attacking, and then the werewolf shows up, and it's like this but it's a misdirect of which carriage they're on, and then it's awesome. You don't like any of that?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Speaking of the werewolves, Mr. Rules guy, do you like in this film how if a cloud goes over the full moon for a second, the werewolf turns back into a human? Which begs the question, in this universe, I guess being a werewolf isn't too much of a curse, because couldn't you just stay indoors? If you're only a werewolf when the moonlight is directly hitting your skin...
that's not true. That's not exactly what's happening.
Oh, that happens multiple times in the movie. Don't tell me it doesn't. There are multiple times in the film... It happens too. At the very spoiler alert, at the end of the film, Van Helsing himself becomes a werewolf, and there's very specifically a moment when he's fighting Dracula, and suddenly he turns back into Hugh Jackman, and we see it's because he looks up and there's a cloud in front of the moon, and then the cloud goes past, and then he turns into the wolf again.
But it's not about the moonlight hitting him; it's just being covered.
That's stupid. That makes no sense, Kristen. You know it. That's ridiculous.
You might be right, but whatever. Okay. Okay. But you didn't like the machine gun crossbow that he can't hit shit with?
No, because I'm not 5 years old. I'm not that impressed by it. Like, and also you mentioned like the Bond Q thing, which clearly they're going for.
Yeah.
Now the problem with that comparison is like they said, like it's a dead-on comparison. The problem is that Q, every incarnation of Q has been a fun character. I swear to God, Chris, if you tell me you like Carl the Friar in this, who is like one of the worst comic relief sidekicks I've ever seen. Come on, buddy.
You don't like
Carl. You do not like Carl.
Hold on. You didn't like when Carl saves that chick from the vampires, and then she's like, "What can I repay you with?" And he's like, "Have sex with me."
Dude, there's two scenes watching this the other night where like so dated this film, you know what I mean? And like obviously I'm sure like that one stuck out to you. It's like, "Ooh, you would just not do that now," right? Yeah. Like the fact that he's like, she's like, "Yeah, what can I do to thank you?" And he whispers into her ear, and she's like, "You can't do that. You're a monk." He's like, "Well, technically, I haven't taken my vows or anything." And then you just cut to them waking up in bed the next day. So that's really gross, you know. Yeah. And then the other one, which I think about, because this has been like a hot debate recently with certain films, and particularly like Joss Whedon movies, is they do like that old joke of Kate Beckinsale like landing on Hugh Jackman with her like crotch like right in his face. And you know, I was thinking about how this is like just a little bit of a tangent on that, because we've seen that done so often, and it's the kind of thing I never used to think about before. And it's like I thank myself that like, oh, I am like happy that there's more discussion about this, and I can start to realize why that is a problem. Because I was just thinking of suddenly like, oh, imagine being Kate Beckinsale and being asked to do that, right? Like that, just the whole like concept of that, of like, hey, for this scene, we want you to film a thing where you're like, you put your crotch right in Hugh Jackman's face, and the whole joke is that he looks up and he's like, you know, just what a weird thing to like have to do on like a set, you know, and probably do like multiple times, and all for like the most lowbrow possible joke. But yeah, so those two moments just stuck out to me.
I mean, she was seen in public with Pete Davidson all over him. So
that's true. Yeah. So she really, I mean, yeah.
I don't know anymore.
Clearly, embarrassment is not a factor for her.
No.
But, yeah. Also, her accent's badness, but whatever.
So how did you get here?
We came by sea.
Really? The sea?
Well, yes.
The Adriatic Sea?
Well, yes.
So where do I find Dracula?
Yes.
He used to live in this very house 4 centuries ago. No one knows where he lives now. My father would stare at that painting for hours looking for Dracula's lair. So, that's why you've come?
I can help you.
No one can help me.
I can try.
You can die trying. All of my family has. I can handle this myself.
So I noticed.
The vampires attacked in daylight. They never do that. I was unprepared. It won't happen again.
So why did they attack in daylight?
Clearly they wanted to catch me off guard. They seem almost desperate to finish off my family.
Why is that? Why now?
You ask a lot of questions.
Usually I ask only two. What are we dealing with and how do I kill it?
My father spent most of his life looking for answers, year after year. Tearing through the tower, combing through the family archives.
Call the tower. Start there.
Oh, right.
The only way to save your family is to stay alive until Dracula's killed.
And who will kill him if not me? Who will show courage if not me?
If you go out there alone, you'll be outmanned and outpositioned, and you can't see in the dark. In the morning, we will hunt. But we'll do it together.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. All I think, again, the accents are bad in this movie. The performances are big and showy. Maybe not Hugh Jackman. I will agree with that. He seems to be trying to be the straight man during all this.
Yeah, I honestly wonder how much this film could maybe win me over with a more comedic Van Helsing or like a more engaged. Does that make sense? Like for everything I'm complaining.
No, sorry.
I was just gonna say for everything I'm complaining about. I wonder if like that really is a big anchor on this film for me, is how boring the title character is, and because you're spending most of your time with him and he's just not interesting.
Well, do you think it's just because you want Rick O'Connor, number one, but then also because I don't know who Rick O'Connor is. Rick O'Connell, on the other hand, what'd I say?
Rick O'Connor.
Who's Rick O'Connor?
I think you're thinking of Kevin J. O'Connor, who plays Igor in this, and of course played Benny in The Mummy.
That is exactly. I'm staring at the IMDb right here. That's totally why I said that. The Benny stuff's great.
Well, the Benny stuff is great.
Yeah.
The Igor stuff, not so much.
No, not so much. Yeah, so like in saying that, like there's if everybody's a Rick O'Connell, then nobody's a Rick O'Connell. You know what I mean? Like if it's in this movie, everybody else is so showy and big and loud, but Van Helsing almost needs to not be that. You know what I mean? Or is it just too much?
I don't know if I agree with that. I think we have now over 10 years of MCU movies proving to us that the main character can have some personality and some humor to him as well and still drive the film. And I don't think it holds, especially a movie like this. Think of how, I'm not saying it has to be Rick O'Connell. Obviously, I would prefer the film, but I'm just saying, think of how, and again, you're going to accuse this of being baggage about a version of a character. But like Anthony Hopkins' version of Van Helsing is not very close to the version that's in the book. But just think of like how crazy Anthony Hopkins plays that part, right? He plays it as like this kind of like mad old doctor with this kind of like, insane glint in his eye. Like that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some charisma and some engagement, not just like, I'm Gabriel Van Helsing. I don't know who I am. And it's like, ugh, it's a snooze fest, man.
You don't think Hugh Jackman has like natural charisma? You don't think that there was like natural, like these two beautiful people, like natural, like just sexual chemistry?
Oh no, I don't think they have any charisma together. In fact, like another thing that I have jotted down my notes is, again, it's going to spoiler territory. So as we said, the big crucial element of the third act of this is that, so we find out Anna's brother has been turned into a werewolf. In this movie, the werewolves are essentially Dracula's bodyguards. He uses the werewolves to patrol his castle and patrol his lands during the day. And the whole thing is like, he's like, we got to kill your brother. He's a werewolf. She's like, well, that's my brother. I don't want to kill him. And eventually he gets bit or scratched by her brother. So Van Helsing now becomes a werewolf. And we discover that the reason that's actually kind of an advantage for them is the mythology of this film, which I actually didn't hate this idea. So I'll give props where they're due. The mythology of this film says that the only thing that can kill Dracula is a werewolf. So he has this like fear of werewolves, and that's why he tries to control them. So they understand, like, okay, so here's the good and the bad news. The bad news is you're a werewolf, and it's a curse. We got to try and get rid of it. And if you're like a werewolf for past a certain amount of time, you're just that forever. The good news is you can kill Dracula as a werewolf, and they discover Dracula actually keeps an antidote, like in his castle, that will cure lycanthropy for people, so that he can use it as a weapon if anyone is ever coming for him. So this is all building to the point of, we get the big fight between terrible CGI werewolf Van Helsing and terrible CGI Dracula. And in the space of that, Anna, Kate Beckinsale, she's the one who like rushes in and stabs Hugh Jackman with the syringe to cure him. But in doing so, like he tackles her when she does that, and it murders her. Such a like weird death too, right? Because it's like he just tackles her. There's like, the movie's a PG-13, so it can't show any like real damage to her. It's very weird how she's just seems like she like dies. I don't know. It's bizarre. But then he like, picks her up, and they have that hilarious moment where he's like, the wolf howls and turns into him yelling no. Very reminiscent of like the Darth Vader no, but far stupider. But I didn't think the movie like earned that tragedy. I didn't feel like the tragedy of her death at all. I didn't feel like they had a connection where it seemed like, oh, I feel bad for him. Like, so no, I didn't find them to be like a great screen couple or anything at all.
I wrote that down, like about how Van Helsing kills Anna by accident, and how I liked it because it shows the stakes of the movie, and surprisingly kills one of the main trio that nowadays would never happen. Like that like just doesn't happen at all. Like what you said about putting all your ideas in this movie. it doesn't leave much for the next adventure, even though they were obviously wanting to do that. You didn't have to kill the last of the Valerius people in this film. So I kind of liked it because that's something we don't really see anymore.
I mean, if he's supposed to be monster James Bond, he would have just had a different woman in every movie, right? Run into like a different Romani in every film or something. But
yeah.
But don't worry, she dies, but we do get the stupid like ghost Kate Beckinsale in the sky. A young J.J. Abrams is probably watching that and going, I have an idea for maybe how to end a Star Wars movie in the future.
That was quite bad.
Because it looks as bad as the Rise of Skywalker one does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me take a moment here, Chris.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. No, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, didn't you like when the werewolves changed? Didn't you like when they were like they'd like tear off their skin? And shit?
Chris. I was just about to say, let me take a moment here and go through the things I do like.
Okay,
right?
cool,
so
cool,
it's
cool,
not just a total shit fest. So you can hear like what do I like. So I did jot down a list of things I liked.
Okay.
And Chris, because you brought it up, I'll just start werewolf transformations. I think even though I hate that so one of the worst things to happen to werewolf movies, and like werewolves as a cinematic concept, is CGI, because werewolf movies are always better practical. There's just no doubt about that. Like werewolves are a monster that you think of like, the amazing transformation sequence in American Werewolf in London, which is still like never been topped, but also like the fantastic ones and stuff like The Howling. Like how cool like the practical werewolves are in movies like Dog Soldiers and Ginger Snaps, like more recent films. And I just hate CGI werewolves. Now, putting that aside, the visual idea of the way the werewolves transform in this is pretty cool. To where you said like when someone turns into a werewolf, they actually tear their human skin off and they're a werewolf underneath, and then it like reverses that later, right? As the werewolf, they kind of like pull the fur and it's like it sheds off of them and they're a human underneath. Now, if you're like paying attention, you'll notice that they were able to do that without like taking the clothes off, or like, at least the underwear. Kind of weird, but no, I do like that. So that's one thing I like. Okay.
You just wanted to see them rip their dick off.
Well, that'd be great, right? Accidentally, like or maybe it regrows every time. Who knows? You know. Another thing I liked. Now this comes with a caveat, as a lot of this does. I like the idea in this film that Van Helsing's this like agent of the Vatican. He works for the secret organization. They send him on these missions. So he's the hero. He's going around hunting monsters. But the entire world thinks he's a villain. And he's like this wanted man, because every time he kills a monster, all they see is the aftermath. So when he kills Mr. Hyde at the beginning, they find the body of respected Dr. Jekyll, right? And then they point up and they go, look, it's Van Helsing. And so like everywhere he goes, there's like wanted posters for him. He's kind of got this reputation. I wish the movie did more with that. I know you don't like when I rewrite stuff, but I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool in this movie if, because of that, because he's like this wanted man, if you added in another factor, not to like overcomplicate things, but it would have been kind of neat if there was someone hunting him, like an authority figure, like a cop or something, after Van Helsing, that is like another obstacle or another complication. But it doesn't really do that. But I like the idea of that he can like, he can't even be celebrated for the hero he is. Instead, he's thought of as a criminal. So that's cool. What else do I have here? The Brides of Dracula are hot.
Well, hold on. Stop there then.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, they are super hot. But also, I really liked their design. It's shoddy CGI notwithstanding. I do like they transform into like these winged creatures that are just like not wearing any clothes, but they're almost like just female bats, which I like.
They look pretty cool. I'll give you that. Like they're like, again, some of the designs in this are cool. Like some are bad. I hate the design of Frankenstein's monster in this, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
But their design is pretty cool. And actually, I'm always like iffy about, you just talked about rules and I was just saying the thing about werewolf things. Like there's a part of me that's always like, I never know how I feel about clothes transforming into something else in movies, you know? Mm-hmm. This is like a big thing I always have, this logical discussion with my friends about the character of Mystique in X-Men.
Yes.
Right? Where she's like, is she always naked? And if she's always naked, that means that whenever she transforms and she's in clothes, those clothes are part of her skin, right? That's weird. But then we see in the movie sometimes where she takes the clothes off, right? Like there'll be a scene where she seduces someone and the dress falls off. You're like, okay, so she was wearing that dress, but does that mean if she would have turned into any other person, that person would be wearing the dress? It's too complicated. Can't think about it. In this, we have a couple things like that to where, like, Dracula is always in clothes, but when he turns into his, like, big bat form, we actually see how, like, the jacket will turn into part of the wings. It's like, that's strange, but whatever. But I will say, like, the way they do it with the brides, where they have those kind of, like, flowing white gowns, and when they transform, you see how the flowing white gown becomes like the wings. It does actually look pretty cool.
Yeah.
They might be actually my favorite design in the film.
Oh yeah, and even like their dresses are super cool. I wrote.
And
this
they're
down.
each like color coordinated too. Like each one is like one's green, one's red, one's purple, I believe. Like I like that. You know.
I read this quote. I can't remember where, but it said the outfits ripped straight from the cover of a 1950s pulp novel.
Oh, for sure,
cool.
yeah.
And I also I loved how over the top their performances are. Like I like a lot in general. We'll get to the man of the hour in a bit, but I really liked how they're always, purring and hissing and posing. They're very theatrical.
Stop your teasing, Marishka, and finish him!
Too bad. So sad.
30 years old. Perfectly aged.
Hello, Anna, my dear.
I want first bite.
And I was a big fan of the brides in this. They were super cool.
If I have a second favorite performance, it's like the primary bride, the redheaded one, that is like Anna's like primary antagonist, the one who like really hates her and is always coming after her. I think she also kind of gets what the movie is and like leans into it. But boy, dude, talk about bad CGI. That one, like the one who gets like staked on the wall and melt. Oof, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's the times, though. Like, it's... I have a hard time, like, looking back on old CGI and, like, really shitting on it. Like, I know we were joking about the Scorpion King thing, but I don't know. Like, it's...
But, like, this is, like, sometimes I agree with that, and then I remind myself that, like, you say, like, the time... This movie was released 10 years after Jurassic Park.
Yes, okay, hold on. Let's push back on that though, because Jurassic Park takes place all in the dark and in the rain. That was they always were trying to hide that.
This movie takes place in the dark. These things aren't running around in sunlight.
But that actually it's pretty light out, except for some cloud cover every once in a while. So it goes back to your little moon issue.
Well, what's Mr. Mr. Hyde's excuse? Because that scene is all at night and he looks like shit.
Bad. Yes, yeah. That was bad. Okay, I did.
The only other thing I have positive is like a performance. So maybe we should just talk about that because we've kind of hinted at it. Like, sure. Let's talk about Richard Roxburgh, who is an actor I don't know too much about. Apparently, he was cast in this because he was like an Australian stage actor who had actually worked with Hugh Jackman before this film in some I think in some stage productions. But I know he's got like we've seen him in like smaller roles and things like Mission Impossible 2 and Moulin Rouge and stuff like that. But this is kind of like for me. The only role where it's like, oh, like I really remember him, and I do remember him. Like I've always said, like my positive on this film is everything you said about what you think this movie is. I think he's like the embodiment of that. He is having so much fun playing Dracula. He's just on a different level than like everybody else on screen, except for maybe that one bride. Like everyone else, I think is trying to play us fairly seriously to me, and he is going pure camp.
Why can't they just leave us alone? We never kill more than our fill. And less than our share. Can they say the same? Did I not stress how important it was to be finished with Anna Valerius before she destroys what we are trying to create?
We lost Mariska.
There, my darlings. Do not worry. I shall find another bride.
What? Do we mean so little to you? Have you no heart?
No! I have no heart! I feel no love! Nor fear! Nor joy! Nor sorrow! I am hollow. And I will live forever.
Oh, my lord. It is not so bad.
I am at war with the world and every living soul in it. But soon, the final battle will begin.
What do you think of him in this?
Oh yeah, he is the height of melodrama. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down, he doesn't so much chew the scenery, but he's like devouring the scenery. Just fully embracing the camp. He's so much fun to watch. I love every scene he's in. again, he adds. I am obviously positive on the film, but I think he is a really, really high point that takes it to that level. And maybe I am bringing a lot of my love for his role in this and bringing it and kind of like overshadowing the film as a whole. I'm not sure, but like I think he's genuinely just awesome as Dracula.
Yeah, no, I would like I that's the thing too. Like, this is where I get into like the miscalculation of this film is that you do a Van Helsing movie and we know that like Van Helsing's primary enemy is Dracula, and then you have that be the first Van Helsing movie and you kill Dracula at the end. Now, not to say you couldn't revive Dracula. Obviously, Dracula was killed and revived in all the Hammer films. So maybe that would have been their plan. Maybe the next movie would have been somebody revives Dracula. I sure hope it would have been for their sake, because I think it was like a big mistake to like dispatch him. And I think you would have been putting yourself at a disadvantage of saying, we need to come up with a new villain after this, because I think he's like the clear highlight here. He's a total blast. It's just like, I love. So Dracula is actually my favorite fictional character. This is something like when the first day of class in my composition course, I have the students fill out this sheet of like, what's your favorite video game? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite TV show? Who's your favorite fictional character? And I always show my example ones, and I've always had Dracula as mine. My students always ask me about that, and I always explain, well, Dracula's such a cool character because he can be reinvented so much. You can have Dracula be a villain. You can have him be a hero. You can have him be this very sexy character. You can have him be a complete monster. You can basically do whatever you want with Dracula, except that boring bullshit from Blade Trinity. Let's kind of get into that. But I particularly love Dracula as supervillain. Like, that's my favorite kind of Dracula, and that's what they go for with this. So even though I don't really get like his plan in this, like I don't understand the thing about using Frankenstein's monster. Why do these egg sacs need electricity? That's like a weird evolutionary quirk, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But because they present it as like the supervillain plan, I'm kind of on board with it. And it also helps that his performance is just so much fun, for sure. Oh no, I have one more positive. I'm sorry, I forgot. I blew past it in my notes. I kind of like that he's billed. The character's name is Top Hat, the town's gravedigger.
Oh yeah.
I just like that he seemed to be. He's not Crispin Glover, but an amazing facsimile of Crispin Glover. I was like so convinced when I saw somebody that was Crispin Glover, and it's not. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. So I wanted to point that out. But since I was just talking about the positive Dracula, so now that I've kind of hit my positives, and just to return to a negative in terms of CGI, and again, this is another example of, I guess you're right that this is a sign of the times, and this is the problem of it. It's like this movie keeps relying on CGI when it doesn't need to. Boy, do I hate whenever Dracula goes to bite someone and they give him that stupid giant CGI mouth. And again, there I just go like, maybe I'm just being persnickety and old school, but why can't Richard Roxburgh just have fangs in and like open his mouth a little wide and look menacing? Why do I have to do that? Because it also looks bad, right? But it's not scary. It's not scary looking. It looks stupid. Like, it's just whatever.
I think the movie's just being extra. Honestly, it's just
being extra bad.
Nope. yeah, I guess so. Well, okay. Well, if you think that was bad, okay, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say about this character, but really the last of the universal monsters that is in this film is Frankenstein's monster. We've mentioned it a few times, but we haven't really talked about the performance or the design. So, Trev, you take it away. I will respond.
I thought it was pretty cool that in this movie, Dr. Frankenstein went to Sharper Image and got one of those like those balls that you get that you put your hands on and it makes like the electricity. And he put those in Frankenstein's monster's heart and head, so that he constantly has the stupid like electricity kind of thing in it. I mean, you just mentioned this movie's extra. The Frankenstein monster in this is just a great example of it, right? He's like over-designed. The fact that he's like, they're going for like the steampunk thing with him, to where when he walks, there's like, one of his joints like is constantly blasting out steam. The fact of his head being like segmented, and every time he like moves his head a certain way, his head starts falling apart and opens. It's all like, hey, look how cool this is. Look at how we can show off our CGI. The performance is like, I don't want to say it's bad. I don't want to like come down on this actor, because I think he's trying something, and I think I get what they're going for with this version of the monster. When you talk about rules, I think there is something that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit, and that by the prologue, right, we see Dr. Frankenstein bring him to life, and then immediately after it brings him to life, Dracula shows up and like murders Dr. Frankenstein, right? And then the monster like is like instantly like heartbroken by that. Like, he grabs Dr. Frankenstein, carries him out. He's like screaming as the villagers are after him. He's like, "Why won't you just leave me alone?" or whatever. And he seems so upset that his creator died. But I'm like, dude, you never even knew that creator. You like had no interactions with him. He died like as soon as you were awoken. And then later in the film, when Van Helsing and Anna find the monster hiding in the sewers, he somehow knows like everything about Dracula's plot.
We must kill it!
Wait. If you value your lives and the lives of your kind, you will kill me!
No.
If Dracula finds me, I am the key to my father's machine. The key to life. Life for Dracula's children.
You already awakened them last night.
Those were from only one bride. From one single birthing. And they died as they did the last time he tried. Only with me can he give them lasting life.
There are more? More of those things?
Thousands. Thousands more.
And it's like, what was he like born with that knowledge? It just makes no sense. So like, okay, that's something. You can try to respond to that if you want, Mr. Rules. But beyond that, like the way he performs it is where they make him very like, he's very verbose. He sings opera. You know, it's like this idea of, oh, he's such this like classical kind of person in this monster's body. But he's just so overbearing and annoying to me that the movie really needs you to like feel like when Van Helsing decides that, oh, he's not really a monster, I can't kill him. But I'm just like, I would kill this guy in a second. He's just so annoying. Like I don't like this version of the monster. Obviously, that's my short way of saying it.
And I actually, this is the weak spot for me in the movie.
Yeah.
Is I do find the performance or the writing or something is off. I think he's really trying to go for something, and I don't know if it has a spot in the movie where there's a machine gun crossbow. You know, with the exploding stagecoach. You know what I mean? Like this Frankenstein's monster is definitely not going for that grunting, you know, not very bright monster. He's going for a more intelligent, philosophical, almost like a tragic figure.
Yeah.
But I think the movie is not well written enough for that to hit home. So it just comes off like annoying. Yeah,
he's not likable, right? I think that's the issue. Like you want him to become part of the gang. You want it to feel like he actually becomes the kind of their buddy near the end, but you always feel like a disconnect between Anna and Van Helsing and him. Like there's no reason for them to feel any connection to him.
I was not to again compare and contrast too much, but you got me into the show, the beautiful, amazing show, Penny Dreadful, years and years ago. It's since been canceled, but there was 3 seasons, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and it tells a complete narrative. So that's the good news.
It is a phenomenal show, and the Frankenstein's monster in there is fantastic.
Yeah, Rory Kinnear, such a great performance. Yeah,
yes,
just beautiful, like everything you just say, right? Beautiful, tragic, haunting.
Yes,
yeah,
and I think maybe I was now that I have that memory in me watching this movie, this one's just like loud and annoying. And I know the movie could be said to be that way as well.
Yeah, I was just about to say
I
that.
know, I got you there before there. But the Frankenstein's monster is my weak spot in the film.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what's an awesome thing though? And you have to agree with me, right? And
I think you're right, because I think I am about to agree with you.
You are right.
Is it time for score horror?
Oh, it's fucking score horror moment, man.
Yeah.
Alan Silvestri's score in this. First of all,
Chris, before you say that, let me just, because I know you're getting kind of annoyed with me, I'll just come in. Whatever you're about to say, I'm just gonna say, this score rips, dude. This score is pretty great. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Alan Silvestri is one of my all-time faves, and probably you as well. But it's like Alan Silvestri is classic Hollywood in a nutshell. Back to the Future. He's incredible. He's
one of the great theme makers.
Yes,
right?
Loves a motif. Loves a motif. So this score, again, back in 2004, Chris was getting into scores and orchestral stuff, and I would seek out the albums, right? Like I would try to go find them at the Best Buys and stuff, and they were actually hard to come by back then. So old Chris, not new Chris, but old Chris used to burn a lot of CDs, okay? And a lot of his burnt CDs were a film score that I'd have to, rip off something that took 3 days to download off like LimeWire. showing our age now. But this score was...
Just keep talking, Chris. I've called... just keep talking. I've called the feds. They're on their way to your place because you were using LimeWire. So
allegedly. I forgot to say that, allegedly. But yeah, back in the day, this was on repeat on my stereo system. As soon as I got an iPod, this was like a mainstay in my iPod. But the main motif to this film is so fucking awesome. It is some of Silvestri's best work. It is, and it sucks because the movie was so ravaged by critics, and it's kind of, I wouldn't say forgotten, but it's definitely kind of like a poo-pooed on.
It's a black eye. It's a black eye.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Silvestri's score, dude. Oh, I'm so glad. I mean, I know you well enough to know that you would not have a.
Yeah, no, I forgot to mention that, and I knew we would talk about it, but like certainly the night watching the movie, there was times where I was thinking to myself like, oh yeah, this is great. I mean, like I wish I could just be listening to this and not having to watch this bullshit around it, because it is a great score, and as you said, like the theme is just fantastic in this. Like it's just. Again, if he got the assignment too. Like he made a score for a much better film than what we have here.
Yeah.
It's actually funny, Chris, that you bring up the memory of like how hard it was to get scores on CDs back in the day, because that, like, as you said that, I was just thinking of how, especially like you said, in the late 90s and early 2000s, when they started to really kind of accelerate putting out scores on CDs. That was still such a weird idea to a lot of people. You probably have the same memory. I have such a memory of going into music stores, like the local record store by my house at the time, and saying like, I'm looking for the soundtrack to this film, and them never understanding that I was talking about a score, and being confused and being like, so you're looking for like the album with all the songs, right? I'm like, no, I want the score. And they're like, what is that? Like the record clerks sometimes didn't know what I was talking about. They're like, why would you be buying like the background music for the film? Like it took a while for people to kind of clue that like, no, these are great pieces of art that you can like listen to like outside of it, you know.
The exact same experience. Absolutely. I used to have to special order stuff. And my explanation was always movie music. That was my go-to description. But yeah, that's so funny. I've completely forgotten about that. Going up to the clerk and they have no fucking clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, because the one I was thinking about is they released like 2 albums for The Crow. So first of all, The Crow has like one of the best soundtracks of all time. But I also like the score. But I remember like wanting to get the score and just people being like, well, but this, and always handing me the soundtrack and be like, I've already got that. It's awesome. But now I'd like the movie, like you said, the music from the movie. Like, well, yeah, this, right? I'm like, oh my God, it was just so frustrating.
That's hilarious.
But I never bought the Van Helsing score because after seeing this theater, this movie was not going to get any more of my money.
Well, like I said, I bought the score, I bought the movie, and I had the poster that was from the theater, double-sided, on my wall for probably about a year. So.
Sorry, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking of an easy way to like get out of doing this podcast.
I look forward to the next 3 of this Curse of the Dark Universe. So basically, bottom line, I still really enjoy this movie for what it is, in my opinion. I think it's fun, dumb trash, with glimmers of just like spectacle and blockbuster filmmaking. Trev thinks it's a pile of garbage, and there's gonna be no convincing either way, I think, in this one. But I think
I think I'm mostly annoyed by it because, like, obviously, like, for me, it's not just a horror thing. I think I'm just always annoyed by films that seem to me to be missed opportunities, like I said. Like, because I think there's obviously a germ of a great idea here. And I think I've already hit on like where I think they made a lot of mistakes. Throwing all the monsters into one film right off the bat, I think was a miscalculation. I think asking Hugh Jackman, a very charismatic actor, to downplay this part and to be like too super serious man was a miscalculation. So it's just like I look at this film and I think it keeps making missteps, which is part of our intro. So that's okay, I guess. But yeah, it just doesn't do much for me. But I'm happy someone enjoys it, I suppose.
Yes.
So good on you. You can't like it too much. You never upgraded to Blu-ray, but whatever,
Did they even make a Blu-ray?
Universal burned all the negatives.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, man. Yeah. But so this movie was a critical failure, so it didn't get any sequels. But there was a spin-off TV series that was pitched to NBC. I don't know if you read about this, but it was called Transylvania. It was supposed to feature a Wild West sheriff that's taken to Europe to battle monsters, and they were in talks, or at least thinking about having occasional guest appearances by Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing.
All right, before you go any further, remove the Hugh Jackman part from that, dude. A show called Transylvania about a Wild West sheriff who goes to Transylvania. That sounds awesome. Like, I want that show right now. Yeah, that's great.
Unfortunately, we all know how TV budgets work, and that was deemed incredibly expensive. It was actually going to be shot in Romania. So just the money was not there. And then also, this opening weekend for this film was not great. And
wasn't the opening weekend okay, and then it like crashed in the second weekend? Like, that's my memory of it.
Yeah. Well, again, like, what do I have here?
This is one where I remember like kind of the talk right away being this was like kind of an instant victim of bad word of mouth. Like it was as you said, it was pretty savage almost immediately.
Yes, your memory serves you right, Trev. Opening weekend was about $52 million, and the next weekend it dropped 60%. Yeah. And 60% is quite a bit. That's quite a steep drop. We're seeing that right now with some certain movies dropping 60, 70%. And that's usually, it's over at that point. Like this one, I said, it only made $120 million domestically. That's over the entire time it was in theaters. So,
and you have to put that in perspective. It's like if that happens to like a regular movie, it's like, oh, but when this is a film coming from the director of the Mummy films, having Hugh Jackman, right? Like right away, you understand there's a problem here because this should have been Money in the Bank for sure.
Absolutely. On top of that spin-off TV series that was crash and burn before it ever got off the ground, Stephen Sommers actually did come out with 2 spin-offs. One was an animated prequel, which I think was like given out with the DVD. I can't remember.
I think so. Yeah, I think that was like if you bought this at like Best Buy or something, it was like shrink wrapped in there or something. Yeah.
So Van Helsing, the London assignment, that was going to show him going to stop Mr. Hyde, which is the beginning of the movie. They also did a one-shot comic book that takes place right after the Mr. Hyde stuff and before the Rome stuff in the movie. So just kind of bullshit, really. That's what it comes down to. But yeah, the spin-offs are there. Now, this property lay dormant until 2012, where Universal Pictures announced that they would be rebooting the film with Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, the 2 guys kind of in charge of the Star Trek reboot at this point.
Yeah, if you want quality, Kurtzman and Orci.
Yeah, they are...
notorious hacks. Let's just say it.
They just canceled on us for next week.
That's fine. I don't want to talk to those guys.
But the interesting thing here, and this is going to be laying groundwork for 3 episodes from now, 3 episodes from now, they actually were in negotiation, and it sounded like Tom Cruise was going to star as Van Helsing back in 2012.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I remember all the scuttlebutt in 2012 of Tom Cruise perhaps taking this on, and I remember actually getting kind of excited for it. You know, being happy that we weren't getting a follow-up to the terrible one, and thinking like as I said, I think there's a potential here. I think the idea of a Van Helsing-centered action franchise makes sense. Certainly wasn't excited about Kurtzman and Orci being the guys, right? But the idea of them moving forward with it and Tom Cruise, I was fairly like, I don't want to say overly optimistic, but I was willing to give that project the benefit of the doubt at that time.
Yep, but unfortunately, he left the project in about 2015, and then it kind of lay dormant for some more, and then that's when around they started talking about the Mummy reboot, which we'll get to later. We don't have to cover that here.
Nope.
But when it comes to Van Helsing, this is interesting, Trev, that almost a year ago, December of 2020, sounds like there's more information about this property. I think you have all the information there.
Yeah, so as recently as 2020, as Chris said, there's been some announcements about a potential remake of this moving forward again. Or I guess we should say a reboot, a new imagining of Van Helsing as a franchise. And our old buddy, James Wan, is involved again. The same guy who apparently now is also developing a new version of Dylan Dog. Apparently he's just going to swoop in and take all of our films that we're covering. I can't wait for James Wan's Gem and the Holograms. But James Wan also producing apparently a Van Helsing reboot. Julius Avery has apparently signed on to direct. If that name sounds familiar to anyone out there, it's because he was the director of the awesome Overlord for J.J. Abrams, a really badass World War II set horror film that so like underseen and underappreciated. Go check that out, people. But he's attached to direct. James Wan is on as a producer, and it's meant to be a joint production between Universal and Wan's Atomic Monsters, and that's obviously feeding into, which is again a thing we'll talk about throughout the next 3 episodes. Kind of Universal's new approach to how they handle all these Universal monsters, because I think we should let's just end on this. This movie was a failure. It obviously kind of crashed and burned. It didn't get the franchise it wanted, but this movie does have a legacy. So as you just said, like the fact that the movie kind of underperformed, maybe the fact that also then did a little bit better on DVD, they were still interested in doing more with this idea. You know, they had seen the heights of it with The Mummy, and then maybe they felt like they just made some slight missteps on Van Helsing, but they still saw the potential of the Universal monsters as a franchise. And what we're going to be looking at in the weeks ahead is how Universal keeps trying at this, right? How they keep saying, like, there's something here. I think we can reboot these. And Van Helsing was really one of the first attempts to say, let's go back to that original idea of throwing all the monsters together. Now we're going to look at a couple attempts where they try to keep them separate, and then it'll come all back around full circle to the next attempt to bring them together again. And I think, and then we end up in a place now where Universal is just doing like kind of the DC approach, right? Saying like, you're a filmmaker with a cool Dracula idea, fine, go make that. Oh, you have a cool idea for the Wolfman, fine, go do that, and not worrying about tying them all together. And you and I can certainly talk about which we prefer, which version we think works. I just know whatever it is, Van Helsing ain't it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to leave it off, Trev. Leave our listeners wanting more. You know, their eardrums are oozing. No? All right. So follow us on Twitter at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod. That's Instagram, Facebook, everything. Check your podcast app. There's links to our letterboxds and whatnot. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, please rate, review, whatever you do. You know, throw us a star rating. That'd be cool. Whatever you deem us worthy. Hopefully more than what Trev deems Van Helsing worthy. Also, just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. That's the best. Keep along the Curse of the Dark Universe. It's going to be more fun episodes like this one. And, Trev, I got a question for you. What would you do with 3 gorgeous women for 400 years?
I think I would get us together and we would dedicate our immortal lives to tracking down and destroying every remaining copy of Van Helsing. And the good news is we probably only have to go to your house.
Thanks for listening.
See ya.